Welcome to the Conversations Concerning Us YouTube channel. I'm Kenneth Marple, and today I'm going to get a little bit pastoral on you. Alright, the gospel is offensive. Yes, I know how that sounds, and if you have read anything that I've written or seen any of my videos, you will know that this statement does not mean what you thought it meant when you first heard it. So I am not saying that I am offended by the gospel of Jesus Christ, but I am saying that the gospel message is offensive, and Paul seems to agree with me. 1 Corinthians 1:18 reads, "For the word of the cross, i.e., the gospel, is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God." So I wanted to provide some thoughts about this and maybe provide a takeaway that we can apply to our lives surrounding this idea of offensiveness. Now, I think the primary reason that this popped into my head was looking at our current culture. It seems that offending someone in any way is some cardinal sin in our modern era. I think this is a point that no one can really deny. We see it almost daily on the news. We see the calling for the removal of historical statues and monuments because it is offensive to someone. I understand to a degree why people would not want the open display, almost signifying acceptance, of slave owners from America past. But the only reason, or at least the primary reason given for the demanded removal, is it offended someone, or someone's plural. Some people look at the Black Lives Matter movement, for instance, as offensive, but to call for its removal would bring down the wrath of the many. For the record, I am not calling for the removal of anything, but am simply pointing out what I see is happening. But why is it wrong to offend someone? It seems that to get to the root of any problem, there is the potential to offend someone. I can tell you from personal experience that when my wife and I are working through a problem, I invariably offend her. Sure, I think she doesn't like it, and I get offended too, but we both realize that when there are hard things to deal with, there are going to be hard things to hear. So what is more, when there is something that is considered offensive, it seems that the goal of the group is to cancel out this detractor. If you silence the problem, there is no problem, right? When canceling doesn't work, the next move is character assassinations, which seeks to discredit the side that disagrees. But if we all agreed, how in the world would we be able to build, develop, and advance new ideas that makes everything better? I'm not sure how this process would look, but I believe history has informed us a little bit about how if you don't agree with the group that's in power, how it works out. Now, why in the world am I concerned about this idea of removing offensive things? Well, if Paul is correct, and the gospel, i.e. the word of the cross, is foolishness or stupid or offensive to the unbeliever, then it seems culture is getting prepared to remove the gospel. Now, I'm not suggesting some doomsday scenario where the government is coming for our Bibles. Not yet, at least. But I am saying that the environment is being set to where removing the gospel in the public square is not outside the realm of possibility. Now, this is scary for a couple of reasons. Now, America was built on the freedom of religion. That's not just Christian belief, but for all people. However, many find Christianity to be offensive because we have a differing moral code in some cases, and that cannot be tolerated in a civilized society. Case in point, if you remember the baker that would not bake a cake for the homosexual wedding because it went against their beliefs to support a union with which they disagreed. 2. Since I believe Christianity is truth, the idea of being banned from practicing it or preaching it is keeping others from exercising their inherent freedom to choose. If the gospel is removed due to its offensive material, then the deck is stacked against the world, and it is stacked against truth. 3. It could be a sign for the end times. Now, I'm not one for really diving deep into the end times, not because I don't find it important or interesting, but rather I'd like to focus on Christ and seeing Him preached to the world. I want to be careful here because my goal is not to say something the wrong way or to give the impression that I'm not being thoughtful on this matter. But I see the end times as already set, and it is going to happen. So I'm not so much concerned with the end game because I know where that is. But rather, I'm concerned with all of the time prior to it. Now, as Christians, I think it is hard for us to see why the gospel is offensive to anyone. Well, I think we can all recall a time when we were being convicted by the Holy Spirit and came to that realization that we were sinners and were unable to save ourselves from the judgment of God. I don't know about you, but that's pretty offensive. I mean, when you think about it, I think we were offended at the fact that we have offended a being as great as God. But for the unrepentant or carnal man, this idea that he needs to be saved or that he needs saving because he has this inherent sin within him that separated him from the love of God, this sounds pretty offensive. I mean, the lines of thought that must run something like, but I haven't killed anyone, so I must be an alright guy, or I try my best to be a good person and God must understand this. Well, it's not so much about us being good enough for God. It's really about the fact that He's perfectly holy and good, and His perfect justice does not allow for the collusion with anything less than perfection. Now, this concept may be hard to grasp, but at its core, it's really quite simple. I can try and dumb it down, but when you have kids, or your kids have bad friends, most parents, I believe, step in and say, hey, those kids aren't good for you, and I think you shouldn't be friends with them. Now, this is not synonymous or even a great analogy for this, but the reasoning is good behind this because we all know that the bad and the good shouldn't coexist together. The bad deserves what it deserves, and the good should be upheld and kept as good as possible. Now, I think a great verse that can help explain this whole blindness and offensiveness thing is 2 Corinthians 4:4, in whose case the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Now, the God, little g, of this world is Satan. So I think it's safe to assume that this cancel culture could be a result of what he plans to do later on. Maybe this is his big setup and he's going to slight God in the end. Not a chance, right? Light often shines brightest at night, and night for the Christian will inevitably be the tribulation. But I think when it comes to that, the love of Christ can shine very bright, because it will be the polar opposite of what's going on during that time, and I'm talking about the tribulation. So, how do we fix the situation? The short answer is I have no idea. I know you were waiting for some super deep spiritual insight, but I don't know. I think the only thing that we can do is continue to preach Christ, show His love, be an example, and let the rest be in God's hands. There is no way that we can make the gospel less offensive, much the same as we cannot make a blind person less blind. John 15, verse 18 and 19 states, if the world hates you, you know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, Because of this, the world hates you. Now, these are the words of Jesus. And though he was speaking these words to his disciples, these words should ring true for us as well. Now, going forward from here may be difficult, but the best course of action is to keep Christ as the center. We must try hard to work tirelessly for God to reach the lost. We must work to fill the world with the love of Christ. And I'm not talking big scale necessarily. This can mean being a present husband or wife, teaching your kids, being there for a friend. These little things matter because they are not little to that person they're for, nor are they little to God. Each person bears the image of God, the Creator, and grace, love, and mercy shown to another human person is showing respect for that image. Now let me say that if this cancel culture and speak nothing lest someone be offended ideal continues to worsen, we should consider it a joy to preach Christ in such odd and dark times. Even if we find ourselves knocking on death's door, know that Christ will keep us, and we should always give him the honor. Now, if you have liked what you heard here today, subscribe, hit the like button, share it. Really, I just was hoping to give some insight and go a little bit more the pastoral route. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope Christ blesses you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.